Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sakina Alston, and I am currently a student at East Coast Polytechnic Institute, that is ECPI. I am completing an assignment for Nursing 511, that's Theoretical Foundations, a Multidisciplinary Approach, and my instructor is Instructor Colvin. We were instructed to do a nursing theory review, and I chose Dorothy Johnson's Grand Nursing Theory of the Behavioral Systems Model. Excuse me. So Dorothy Johnson, Savannah, Georgia. Her education consisted of an undergraduate BSN degree from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. She got that in 1942. In 1948, she went back to get her master's in public health, and she got that from Harvard University. During her career, she was an assistant professor of pediatric nursing. She was an associate professor of nursing. She was a professor of nursing at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. They used a lot of her model there. She retired in 1978. So her model is the behavioral systems model. It is a grand nursing theory, so it covers a large and wide scope of information, and there are a lot of definitions and can be applied widely in nursing practice. It is based on human needs. It was first proposed in 1968. So the characteristics of human needs theories are that they encompass the body, physiology, mind, and social interaction with the environment and people. Persons are evaluated using this theory are considered to be the sum of all these parts. Humans are acknowledged as spiritual beings. Continued characteristics of human needs theories. Humans naturally respond to their environment. Change is anticipated and expected as humans acclimate to their environment. Every effect is related to an affect. We must find the goals are to find the effect, equate it, measure it, and restore it back to baseline or health. Just making sure everyone's still paying attention. So the assumptions of the behavioral systems model are that there is a system, and that is the patient or the human being, and they are a system of behaviors the behaviors are organized, and they should, when they're working well, they maintain health. So the structure is all the parts of the systems interlock with instinctive behaviors to keep the system stable. So the person, who is composed of a system of behaviors, has all these different behaviors that are pieces of the person, some of the parts. You put them together to have an intact system. And the behaviors that the person does are instinctive or natural adaptations to the environment. So the environment is internal or external effects on the system, such as elevated blood sugar would be an internal effect, and an external effect would be cold weather. The nurse's role is to assist in regulating the behaviors to keep the system stable. So if it was cold outside and the person who is the system did not initiate a behavior to keep themselves warm, such as wear a hat or turn up the heat, the nurse would assist in regulating those behaviors to keep the system stable. She would turn up the heat for a person who was cold to restore an appropriate body temperature. So major assumptions of the theory. The type of behavior and the consequences achieved allow determination of the drive stimulated or the goal sought. So we can observe the behaviors of the person, and we can see what goal they're trying to accomplish. So if they put on a hat, they might be trying to keep their head warm, or what drive was stimulated, such as the drive to want to have a child or have a family might cause someone to look for a mate or reproduce. Each individual has a predisposition to act with reference to the goal in certain ways rather than other ways. This predisposition is called a set. So we are individuals, we are unique, and so we have different behaviors that we would initiate, each of us, to get our goal accomplished. And this predisposition is called a set. So we have a set goal, individuals. That's our baseline. So each subsystem has a repertoire of choices called a scope of action. Each subsystem is a set of behaviors to achieve some kind of goal or function specific. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So the individual patient's behavior produces an outcome that can be observed. Like I said earlier, we can see what type of behaviors they do. They can see what type of behaviors they will exhibit, which is helpful when we are trying to do nursing plans and diagnoses based on this theory. So concepts and definitions, there are several because this is a grand nursing theory, so I'm not going to read each and every one, but you can feel free to go back and read them when the presentation is over. I will go over ones that I think are really important to understanding how the behavioral systems model works. So the one that I'm going to go over right now is the behavioral system. The man is a system that indicates the state of the system through behaviors. So we can tell how somebody is doing, how healthy they are or how not healthy they are, how well they are adjusting to influences on the structure by what behaviors they exhibit. So concepts and definitions continued. There is stability, which is balance or steady state in maintaining balance of behavior within an acceptable range. So there is a range of behaviors that you don't have to be in one spot of your behavior. You don't have to be doing one exact thing. There's a range of behaviors that you can do that could still keep the structure intact of the system, such as if a person was hungry, they could eat a very big meal, like a Thanksgiving dinner, or they could just eat a snack. That would still be a range of behaviors that would keep the system stable. Stressor is a stimulus from the internal or external world that results in stress or instability. Structure, the parts of the system that make up the whole, and system, that which functions as a whole by virtue of organized, independent interaction of its parts. So each behavior is a portion of the behavioral system. They all work together so that the system can be intact, the structure of the system can be intact. They're all parts of a whole. Concepts and definitions continued. There's subsystems that will be some examples of later. Tension variables. You can go over them and refer back to these slides later for better understanding. So the 7 subsystems are attachment or affiliative subsystem, dependency subsystem, eliminative subsystem, sexual subsystem, aggressive subsystem, and achievement subsystem. So these are all systems of behavior that would achieve a goal or prevent harm or promote growth. So the elimination subsystem, that's to make sure that you are getting rid of waste from your body. So the ingestive subsystem is one that I will use to explain an example later, and it fulfills the need to supply biologic requirements for food and requirements. So this is behaviors, a range of behaviors that would fulfill the requirements necessary for food and fluid for the body. The scientific basis of the theory. So this is a deductive theory. It's a grand, starts with grand ideas, large, that cover a large scope, and then it gets more detailed. So it generalizes human behaviors, and then it gets smaller and smaller by looking at specific behaviors and how they influence the human and their health and how to restore their health. The science that the theorists borrowed ideas from is social science, such as Maslow's. Behaviors must meet basic human needs physiologically and protectively and spiritually, and Maslow explains the same thing in his work. The impact on research, education, and practice. So this model utilizes quantitative data to measure problems, implementations, and outcomes. So it fits very well with evidence-based nursing practice. So you make an observation, a hypothesis, you intervene, and then you can measure your outcomes, such as if you observe that a person is unable to eat, you might see that you might make a hypothesis that their blood sugar would be low. So you can measure the blood sugar, then you can intervene, you can feed the person, and then you can measure the blood sugar again and see if your intervention has created the outcome that you wanted, and that would be restoration of health or blood sugar within normal limits. So in practice, UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute and Hospital utilizes the behavior systems model to guide autonomous nursing practice in all of its units. They use it in the same type of way that I just described. The subsystems can be used to make nursing diagnosis, intervene, and evaluate. Promote or evaluate safe quality practice. So they can be applied in the clinical setting to patients of all demographics, bio, psych, socio, cultural compass. They cover the human being as a whole, physically, spiritually, psychologically, and socially. So there will be nursing diagnoses that can be based on this model that can be applied to every aspect of the human. So an example is if a patient is vomiting. This is an example of how to use the model. A patient's vomiting, they can exhibit behaviors of the ingestive system. The nurse can manipulate the environment to facilitate behaviors of the patient so that he or she can fulfill the required behaviors of the ingestive subsystem. Then the nurse can evaluate if the intervention stabilized the system. So a nurse would see that as far as the ingestive system, if someone was vomiting, they were not fulfilling the biological needs of that system, which would be to keep fluid and electrolytes intact within normal limits for survival and health. The nurse could find out, she could manipulate the situation by administering medications such as Zofran to stop the person from being able to vomit. Then she could evaluate by doing a PO trial and offering the patient some ginger ale and see if the patient could keep that down. And she could then know if her intervention to manipulate the behaviors of the person have restored health. Can the person now keep down food? So in summary, the model facilitates efficient and effective behaviors to promote, maintain, and restore health. Function behaviors of each system should protect, provide, and stimulate the system, which is the human. Instability to the system requires nursing to promote behaviors that will restore stability. So the model assumes that the system or the human being will naturally exhibit behaviors that protect, provide, and stimulate. However, if the structure is interrupted by some kind of internal or external stressor, that the individual is unable to change his or her behaviors to maintain or restore health, then the nurse steps in to help the patient manipulate those behaviors so that they can maintain or restore health. That's about it. Do you have any questions? I thank you for coming and listening to my broadcast about the behavioral systems model. Have a great day. Here are the references that I use to get my information about the behavioral systems model.